I clearly remember when I started training calisthenics, my first goal was to do a full pull-up. That was a huge goal of mine, because I remember being laughed at school for not being able to do it. Obviously most kids couldn't do it, but I was like a sports kid and I couldn't do it, and that was quite embarrassing, to be honest. So I did my research and found out that one of the best ways to learn a pull-up is by jumping onto the bar and then slowly lowering down, which is basically an eccentric. So that's what I did. On every training session I went on a bar, jumped onto it and lowered myself down for a few seconds. I treated it like normal reps, so I did like 3 sets of it and called it a day. Obviously I did some other exercises. And that basically repeated for like few months. Do you think I improved? Everyone says that beginners make progress even if they smell the gym equipment, but in my case it took me 6 fucking months to learn my first pull-up, and I achieved it with completely different method of progression than eccentrics that I mentioned before. Obviously right now I know exactly why I didn't progress with these eccentrics, and if you have any experience, any knowledge about training, you also probably cringe at the way I used to train. I'm about to tell you exactly what do you need to progress steadily with eccentric repetitions, and by the end of this video you will have all the knowledge necessary to basically start implementing your eccentric exercise and progress regularly with it. Honestly, I wish I could say that to my younger self, what I'm about to say in this video. That would just make the whole process so fucking shorter, you know? But it is what it is. Let's go. So first I just want to explain why people do eccentrics, why is it a method of training even, and why is it such a good method to reach certain exercises. So usually people use eccentrics to break through plateaus and gain specific strength towards certain elements like unilateral one-arm pull-up or one-arm chin-up. I also found eccentrics very useful in weighted calisthenics. I did them with my weighted pull-up and my stability in the position improved dramatically, like I felt more stable throughout the whole range of motion. It was amazing. So you might want to implement an eccentric exercise when you plateau with your training, when you want to learn specific unilateral skills, when you want to gain stability and strength in weighted calisthenics or other weighted exercises, or if you're just looking for something to fill the gap in the volume because you have too little volume on your training sessions. That works too. So the method I will show you is called chained isometrics, and I learned it from Stephen Lowe, the author of the book Overcoming Gravity. Really good book, you should read it if you're serious about training. It is really fucking thick, like a few centimeters, but it is worth it. Like, so much knowledge in that book. Even there are information on how to treat injuries in training, how to program exercises, everything. So yeah, really good book. I'm not sponsored, by the way. I wish I was, honestly. So this method basically consists of doing 2 to 3 sets of 2 to 3 cluster repetitions of 3 to 10 second eccentrics with 0 to 3 minutes of rest in between the clusters and 3 minutes rest in between sets. Yes, I'm aware that was confusing as fuck, but I will slowly explain to you every one of these things. Basically, one concentric repetition is somewhat comparable to 3 seconds of eccentric repetition. So in order to get nice volume with your eccentric reps, you have to do micro sets inside your regular sets to deliver the amount of volume that will cause serious adaptations. But let's remove these macro sets for a few minutes and you will grasp the concept a lot better. So this looks like a regular structure with reps and sets, right? You do 2 to 3 sets of 3 to 10 second eccentrics with 0 to 3 minutes of rest in between. And these cluster repetitions, we will call them microsets in this video. So there are macro sets and there are microsets. And basically microsets are inside the macro sets. That's pretty logical, right? So now we put macro sets over on this structure. So basically that structure should be repeated 2 to 3 times, this whole thing. So let's say your goal is one-arm chin-up, and currently you are able to do eccentric of one-arm chin-up, but you only can do it for 5 seconds. You are just not able to go slower than 5 seconds throughout the whole range of motion. So how do we apply that knowledge to our scheme? Well, you just perform your 5-second eccentric, then you rest for 3 minutes, and then you repeat that 2 more times. And then you repeat that whole thing once or twice in order to get 2 or 3 macro sets. On your next session, you try to do 6 seconds of one arm chin-up eccentrics, then also rest 3 minutes and repeat that 2 more times, and then also repeat that whole process once or twice in order to get 2 or 3 macro sets. So we change nothing except the duration of the eccentric. So your main priority here is to increase the duration of your eccentric to anywhere from 7 to 10 seconds. That is your goal. You must focus on that and change nothing in your workout routine until you reach that point. Obviously you modify the duration you hold in order to progress steadily towards these 7 to 10 seconds. And once you hit that target, which is 7 to 10 seconds eccentric rep, you can start modifying the amount of rest in between your micro sets. So this really depends on the difficulty of an exercise you're doing. If you're a beginner and if you're just learning a pull-up, your first pull-up, then you can even get away with lowering it by 1 minute. So let's say you do 8-second negative pull-up with 3 minutes of rest in between your micro sets. And then on the next training session, you also do 8-second eccentric, but this time you rest for only 2 minutes in between your micro sets, and on the next workout also 8 seconds and you rest 1 minute. So that eventually you can do 8-second eccentric with no rest in between micro sets. And that is your goal. Because experience has showed that very often people who are able to do 3 7 to 10 second eccentric repetitions are able to do at least 1 full concentric repetition. And that really works for most people. That is why our main priority at first is to increase the duration of your eccentric to that 7 to 10 second range, and then decrease the amount of rest in between your micro sets, so that eventually you get to do your 3 eccentric repetitions with 0 rest in between. And that is the point at which you should be able to do a full concentric repetition. Some people are not really responsive to that method, so if you came to this point but you're still not able to do 1 full concentric repetition, then you should progress the number of macro sets you're doing. So you should progress to doing 5 macro sets of 3 7 to 10 second eccentrics with 0 rest in between them. And if you're still not able to do 1 concentric repetition at this point, then you also progress the number of micro sets, so the amount of eccentrics you do in a row. So at the end you should be able to do 5 macro sets of 5 7 to 10 second eccentric repetitions with 0 rest in between, and obviously in between the macro sets there should be 3 to 5 minutes of rest. And if you reach that point, there is just no way you won't be able to do at least 1 full concentric repetition, you know? That is how it works. However, with more difficult exercises like one-arm chin-up eccentrics, which we talked about earlier, you might want to decrease that amount of rest in between microsets by like 20 seconds, let's say. So you do 3 minutes, then on the next training session you do 240, then 220, 140, 120, you get the idea, until you basically get to 0. So it took us some time to go from 5-second eccentric one-arm chin-up to a full concentric one-arm chin-up. It should be around maybe 15 workouts, so it equals to around 2 to 3 months, depending on how often you train and how often you deload. But if you think about it, is it really that long to reach an amazing unilateral skill? And yeah, that's basically it, that is the method. I hope I explained it clearly. Okay, I had to split the recording into 2 parts because it was getting dark already. And bro, the view behind me was fucking amazing. I didn't even notice that because I was looking at the camera. So what should you do if you're not progressing with this method? A small and minor plateaus can really happen even here. So there are really 2 solutions you can take. I already talked about them in my isometric video, but I will quickly repeat myself. The first solution is to lower the amount of volume with the exercise you plateaued, and also with exercises that work the same muscle groups by around 30%. Or you can also take like 2 additional rest days before your next training session. This basically will eliminate the risk that you're slightly overtrained, because that might be the reason why you're not progressing. And the second option is to increase the volume or intensity with the exercise you plateaued by maximum 10% per training session. So if the first solution didn't work, that means your volume is too little and you have to do more. So you increase it by maximum 10% per training session, only 10% because you don't want to fall into the trap of the first problem, and that should really make progress happen. If it didn't happen after 10%, it will happen after 20% or 30%. There's just no other way. These two solutions must work for you. As I said in my isometric video, if these two solutions didn't work for you, I just don't know how to help you. But what should you do if suddenly you're progressing well, but suddenly on one workout you don't feel stronger than the last time? This can sometimes happen, and there is a very simple way to go about that problem. So if you really don't feel any stronger than you did last time, you might think that you're not able to utilize progressive overload. But you're wrong. For example, you can add one microset to your training, or you can lower the amount of rest for like 10 seconds in between your microsets, and this change is like so little that it doesn't really require more strength from you. It just requires more dedication and more pushing yourself on your training session, and this should really like force these adaptations in your body and break that small stagnation you encountered. You basically really want to avoid a situation where you do exactly the same amount of exercise and the same intensity as you did on your last training session, because that is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing and expecting different results, you know? So remember, that should never happen. There is always some way to do more and to pull it off. There is always some ways to make exercises harder and to force these progressions. So let's summarize everything. 1. You pick an exercise that you can do the eccentric version of that exercise for anywhere from 3 to 7 seconds. If you can already do 7 to 10 seconds eccentric with your chosen exercise, you can skip this step. 2. You steadily progress your eccentric duration until you get to 7 to 10 seconds. 3. You stick to your 7 to 10 second eccentric and you lower the amount of rest in between your microsets eventually to 0. And 4, move to doing concentric repetitions and progressing with them. As I said, in case you still can't do any concentric repetitions here, you progress with doing your macrosets first and then with your microsets. And obviously, I don't know if I mentioned it, but the rest between macrosets should always be 3 to 5 minutes. It is really the best to pick a specific number, like 4 minutes 30 seconds, that you will tap on your timer, and you will always rest this certain amount. Because it can happen that, for example, one workout you're short on time and you're resting for only 3 minutes, and you're wondering why you didn't progress, because you simply rested for a shorter amount of time and you couldn't perform as well on your sets, you know? So even these little things matter in the grand scheme of things. And this is really it. I really hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you got some value out of this video. I really enjoy talking about that stuff, and if it makes even one person progress better and quicker from my videos, then my purpose is fulfilled. I think I will make like one more video about this series Calisthenics for Beginners, and then I will switch to something else. Very few people last till the end, so if you're still watching that, you're a legend. And yeah, thank you for watching. Peace out.